Hey everyone, George with the Art of Water, and we're sort of filming in my home office right now. I just kind of wanted to talk to you about some of the tanks that I have in this particular office. I have four, and they're all nano tanks, of course, but I want to talk to you a little bit about them and how they're doing, and how some of these tanks are really easy for people that are just getting into the hobby to set up. Some of them are a little more advanced and involve CO2 and things like that. These two particular ones are identical tanks, and I have them side by side. As you can see, there are some personal things up the top here, but down at the bottom here, I have one on each side of a 27-inch screen, all-in-one computer here. But they just make just sort of a perfect bookend for this area. I really enjoy them. This first tank, like I said, sparkling Gouramis in here. There's three. There's one female and two males. Now, a lot of people would say that's trouble. I've had these guys in here for quite a while. The male will get a little bit rambunctious with the other male once in a while, but it's not been a real problem. As you know, if you're into the hobby, sparkling Gouramis make sort of a croaking and crickety kind of sound. It's kind of hard to explain, but getting it on film is rare to do. I have had it happen a couple of times when I've talked about this tank, so if you want to go back and look at my videos from the past, you can hear that sound on it. Maybe it'll happen while we're filming here. I don't know, but it's usually the male sort of taking his body and just not touching the other male, but going up next to him and letting him know that he's the dominant male in the tank. So anyways, basically all of my tanks, no matter how many tanks I have in my house, and I don't want to get into that because I have more tanks than I probably should have, but everything I use for substrate is fluval stratas, and I really love this stuff. It's just a great substrate. It's great for plants. It has everything in there necessary to keep plants healthy and thriving, and not even necessary to use CO2 in a small plant nano tank like this. But yeah, some dragonstone, some ironwood, some floating plants in here, a variety of different kinds of plants. Just kind of an interesting little tank for the Gouramis. And as you can see, they just sort of hang out in here, and very peaceful tank. Every once in a while, as I said, you'll get the one male to go after the other a little bit, not in a terrible way, but just enough to let them know who's in charge. Also some autocinclids in here. I have two. That keeps any kind of algae that might start in a tank from really developing. And so I try to put autocinclids in all of my tank because they're a great cleanup crew, along with some there are actually some red cherry shrimp in here, but during the day I don't see them as much as I would like, and but they're in there. So anyways, moving over to this tank here. This tank here has got a little bit of a history to it. I put this tank over here with my chili rasporas. This is also a species tank. The only thing that's in here are the chili rasporas and a couple of autocinclids. But if you remember a couple of months back here, I was cleaning the bigger tank that they were in. It was a 20-gallon, I believe, with ember tetras, and I was in the middle of a water change and had the filter sticking up slightly out of the water, creating a wave at the top. And these guys are so tiny that by the time I came back after a phone call that I had to take, I found that 5 of my little guys had washed over the edge, and I lost them. I did replace some of them, but they're kind of hard to find in the Seattle area without driving a long distance. Unfortunately, they're so popular that they get bought up, and unless you specifically order them, they're kind of hard to find. Now, there's various stages of age in here. You can see that some of these guys are really coloring up, like this guy towards the center at the bottom. Not the bottom, but the center of the tank. In the middle, he's colored up really nicely. He's probably the oldest male that's in here. All the rest of the males, you can see, are starting to color up, but it's taken a little time for them to do that. They'll get along just fine with each other. I'm going to probably build the school up about another 4 fish here over the next couple of months, just not ready to do that right now. Again, maple wood in here, I love, or not maple wood, maple stone in here. I love maple stone, and I just love the colors and the character of the stone. Some ironwood in this one as well, and various different plants. I'm not going to get into all the different plant names and everything, but it's lightly planted. As you can see, the autocinclids are in here now. Because my tanks don't really produce enough algae to keep these autocinclids in top shape, I have to subsidize their food with some algae wafers, which I drop into the tank here. The rasboras have no interest in them, but that can be a problem if you're doing that with other fish, and we'll get into that as we talk a little bit further here. But anyways, yeah, as you can see, these guys are feeding off that wafer at the bottom, and that keeps them healthy. If you look at your autocinclids when they're up against the glasses, which is a lot of times where they hang out, you look at their stomach, if it's sunk in and they're not eating, it's going to be almost impossible to get them back, and they're pretty close to death. So you want to keep an eye on that and make sure that you're being really careful to make sure their bellies are nice and plump and fat, and they're staying healthy. Anyways, we're going to move over here to another part of my office, which is right next to my desk here. And this tank here has also been profiled in some of my videos. This is just a species tank as well, running CO2 on both the top and the bottom tank. We'll get into the bottom tank in a second here. But I have nothing but ember tetras in here. I have some blue velvet shrimp in here. I have some snails. Be careful what kind of snails you put in, because you can really have problems long term if you're not careful. Snails can get a little bit out of hand in the reproduction side of things, and they can also go after some of your more delicate plants. So you got to be careful what you put in with snails, because they find that as a food source, and not a good thing. Anyways, this tank, like I said, is running CO2. I've always run CO2 in here, and the plants are just going crazy. I have to keep trimming them back. We just did a trimming the other day, maybe a week or so ago, and already I'm seeing that these carpeting plants in the front here are starting to get a little bit out of hand again, and we're going to probably have to go in there and knock them down a little bit. So anyways, maple stone in this one. The piece of wood that I have in the center here is just some spider wood, but it's a very unique piece. I did have some trouble with it at first, getting the fungus that we can see often on wood if it's not been seasoned before you buy it. Sometimes people will tell you it's been seasoned, and you'll find out that it's not. This particular one I boiled, baked, put it in a 5-gallon barrel, and I should say a 5-gallon I can't remember what I'm trying to say here, but anyways, a 5-gallon bucket, and I put a heater in there to mimic what the tank would be, and any little spots that were starting to have any kind of fungus problems just went away within a few weeks. And again, boiled it one more time, baked it, put it in here, and I just have not seen any significant amounts of the fungus, which is a nasty smelling thing if you guys have ever dealt with it before. But a pretty natural thing. It doesn't hurt the fish, and goes away after several months if you can, stand to look at it. I can't. I'm kind of one of those people that like their tanks to look pristine all the time, which, as you can see, they do, but that's due mostly to the amount of water changes that I do. Like I said, 50% water changes on every one of my tanks, at least once a week, twice if I've got the time. And anyways, long story short, this is the tank down at the bottom here in my office. It's also a tank that has Utah stone in here. It's a very limey kind of stone that makes the water soft. So I do have to put a little bit of sea chem in here that helps to knock down some of the softness of the water and build it back up. But this is just Harlequin rasboras. That's all I have in here. This is a species tank along with just some autocinclids, and of course just some carpeting plants, some floating plants. We're running CO2 on this as well. All of my tanks, including my betta tanks, have heaters and filters in them. And if we're going to talk about betta fish here in my next video over the next couple of weeks, and we're going to talk about what I think is required for them. But anyways, I just wanted to show you some of the tanks in my office, how pretty they are. I don't have a top on this. I have not lost a single fish in here for some reason. These Harlequin rasporas, because I think some of the floating plants sort of keep that from happening, are just really not having any issues with them jumping out. They've been in here for 6 months or so, and I've never lost a single fish. So that's good, and I think that the fish are happy in here and healthy, and everybody's doing great. Anyways, just wanted to show you some of the tanks that were in my office here, and kind of talk about some of the stuff that was in here. Again, the wood that's at the bottom tank here is just some more spider wood. The same process I used on the top one, I used on the bottom, and I just don't have any problems. Anyways, George with the Art of Water. Now you kind of got a little bit of an understanding of what I have in my office and some of the fish in the tanks that are in here, and it gives you a great idea of some of these that I have. This one at the top here is the largest tank that I have in this office. It is around a 15 gallon, and this guy at the bottom is a 10, or it could be a 7.5. I don't remember exactly. The one at the bottom there has a bowed front on it, and I just really love the look of that particular tank and this one together. They just do a nice job of displaying the fish, and for me, it's just a nice way to have them in my office. Now I have tanks all over my house, and we'll go through the tanks that I have over the next couple of weeks here. We'll get into the more larger tanks downstairs, which I really use pretty much as community tanks, and are much larger tanks than what I have here. But love these little nano tanks. Really enjoy having them here in the house, especially in my office here. They really, when you're alone, just working around the house all day long, feeding them and interacting with them a little bit, just kind of nice to do. And again, not really difficult tanks to set up. Anyone can do this. If you make sure you're doing those 50% water changes, you're not going to have problems with algae. You're not going to have problems with water problems of any kind, and your water will be crystal clear. The filtering systems on these are different. Some are the same as others, but some are different, and we'll talk more about filtration and what I think is important for small little nano tanks here. And again, our next series is going to be talking about betta fish and what I think is required to keep them happy and healthy. And we'll be talking about that real soon, within the next week or two. Anyways, this is George with the Art of Water. I hope you have a great Mother's Day weekend. It's beautiful here in the Pacific Northwest. We got temperatures that are going to be right up into the 80s here early next week, and couldn't be more excited about that. Get out, do some sailing maybe, and just maybe do some hiking around some of the great places that we have in the area. Anyways, George with the Art of Water. Thanks for listening, and please subscribe, leave a comment, and make sure you hit that bell up there so that you get notifications anytime we have a new video. You guys have a great weekend. We'll talk again soon.